So let's be clear, this wasn't a U-turn. A U-turn means turning around and going back in the direction you came from. But you can't turn a car around when you've driven it off a cliff. That's exactly what Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng have done with the British economy, taking the reputation of the Conservative Party, possibly their own political careers with them. So turning back now, their reckless, arrogant decisions have already cost the British economy billions. They've already blown up mortgages. Millions now face crippling new bills in the middle of the worst cost-of-living crisis in memory because of their actions. The markets panicked when they announced their unfunded tax cuts simply because investors have no confidence in the government. Tell me exactly why they or anybody else should have confidence in this. Here's Kwasi Kwarteng, a couple of days after announcing his disastrous policy.
So we're bringing forward the cut in the basic rate, and there's more to come. We've only been here 19 days. I want to see over the next year people retain more of their income.
Pouring more and more fuel onto the fire he'd started. For the record, here's what I said the very next day. With their massive tax cuts, mostly for the rich, Prime Minister Liz Truss and Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng have taken a reckless gamble with our economy, and so far that gamble is failing. So how did that gamble work out? Well, the pound crashed, interest rates spiked, the Bank of England had to intervene to save pensions for millions of people. Still yesterday, fingers in her ears, Prime Minister Liz Truss said this to the BBC's Laura Kuenssberg.
Are you absolutely committed to abolishing the 45p tax rate for the wealthiest people in the country? Yes.
Well, she was, but it turned out only for a few hours because the very next morning, this morning, she reversed. And the Chancellor, well, he came out and said this.
We were focused on delivering the growth plan. There's a lot of good stuff in the growth plan. And what was clear, talking to lots of people up and down the country, talking to MPs, talking to voters, talking to our constituents, was that the 45p rate was becoming a huge distraction.
A distraction? A distraction, Chancellor, would be if a fly suddenly moved past my head and distracted me. What you did collapsed the economy, destroyed the pound temporarily, and even with the markets in meltdown, you and your Prime Minister spent a full week doubling down on your ridiculous decision. And you knew best. We were all wrong. I asked tonight, how can any of us trust them again with our finances? They wanted to cut taxes for the rich. They refused to tax energy companies as they roll in their billions of unexpected profits. They lifted any cap on bankers' bonuses, all with no independent financial oversight. Didn't even tell their cabinet about half this stuff. This was always going to be a tone-deaf disaster. The only people who couldn't see that were running the country. Well, now confidence in them is shattered, perhaps permanently, because first impressions last. That's why this isn't a U-turn, it's a car crash, and they're expecting us to pay for the repairs. Well, joining me now is Talk TV political editor Kate McCann. Kate, I have seen some whopping mistakes in my time. This is one of the biggest I can remember. To have to basically do a U-turn on this huge tax cut policy on the morning of your own conference, when you've only been in the job 3 weeks. I mean, for Kwasi Kwarteng, a disaster. For Liz Truss, a disaster. For the Conservative Party, a disaster.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's actually, in some ways, even worse than that, because how it came about last night was absolutely fascinating. I mean, we're all here at Conservative Party conference. You know, Piers, that these events don't end at normal working day time, 7, 8 o'clock. They go on until midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. And so there was a party last night where Liz Truss gave a speech. It was for the 1922 Committee on Conservative Home, really an audience of her biggest supporters. She stood on the stage, she said, I'm all for difficult decisions, Conservatives' tax cuts, I love the city, I love business, we shouldn't be ashamed of making these arguments. Essentially, I'm not going to U-turn. But crucially, she had already, when she gave that speech, made the decision to do exactly that, to go back on that 45p tax rate. And so those in the room looking back on it are now wondering, well, hang on a minute, what was she saying to us when she was promising all these difficult decisions would be stuck to? And again, you know, a late-night party last night, journalists and cabinet ministers there, this whisper goes around the room that the 45p rate policy is gone, and the immediate response was, no, surely not. They're not going to do that, are they? Even cabinet ministers didn't believe it, didn't know about it, weren't told about it. Some of them, including Jacob Rees-Mogg, found out this morning from a text message by Therese Coffey, the Deputy Prime Minister. This is a party that has been rocked by the response to what they saw, many of them, as a fundamentally conservative budget. They didn't expect what happened to happen in the markets, and now they are trying to reassure both the markets and the party here that they are still the right people for the job. The problem, Piers, is that the Conservative Party has always traded off its economic credibility, and when you knock into that, particularly at a time when Labour is trying to gather momentum in the polls, well, things can look pretty dangerous for you.
Well, they can. I thought one of the worst things that they did in the whole farcical process was the Prime Minister yesterday admitting they'd failed to do the groundwork for this mini-budget. I mean, how could you fail to do the groundwork for a budget of this magnitude with the repercussions and implications so gigantic? It just seemed to me a complete failure of economic competence from a party which has always prided itself on being the party of economic competence.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people heard that from the Prime Minister and had some questions about it because she had laid a significant amount of economic groundwork in her leadership race. She'd indicated that she was going to make the tax cuts that she wanted to and then did do in the mini-budget. The problem was that they then went further. The 45p tax rate was a surprise to most of the Cabinet when they heard it in the House of Commons. And the indication, as you said, from Kwasi Kwarteng, the Chancellor, the next day that there would be more to come. Those are the things that the markets really reacted to. They'd priced in a lot of the other elements of this. There were some questions about borrowing, yes. But some of those closest to Liz Truss, her economic advisers, those within the circle, had warned her, go steady, don't do anything too rash. The markets are jittery. Just do what you have to do. Send a signal, yes, but don't go too far. And for some reason, they chose not to listen. And now they're trying to wind that back. And it is difficult. The mood here, you know, usually the Conservative Party has quite a buoyant conference. There are a lot of MPs here. You do not have to go very far or even ask them a question for them to start telling you how bad things are. Even, I have to say, the ones who are out defending the government, behind the scenes they say, well, we'll lose our seats. This is probably going to be my last party conference, maybe the last but one. We're not in a great place.
There's actually, it almost looks like a sort of funeral parlour behind you tonight, which is probably the right kind of mood. Final question, and a quick one, Kate. as you look around the morgue, I would say very, very, very high likelihood that one of either Kwasi Kwarteng or Liz Truss, or potentially both, gone by Christmas. Will you take that bet?
No. And I know we've been here before, and I know how it ended last time. But no, because there is no appetite in the party for a new leadership contest and because Liz Truss has firmly tied her wagon to Kwasi Kwarteng, and I don't think she can get rid of him. I might be wrong.
I think you were wrong last time, and I think you'll be wrong again. You should trust. you should just trust old Mystic Morgan, I'm afraid. Kate McCann, good to talk to you. We'll be back with you tomorrow night. Good luck down there. Don't over-enjoy the atmosphere. My God.